Hey everyone, welcome back to Deep Nonsense, the show where we peel back Hollywood's curtain, sometimes to fact check the impossible, and sometimes just to bask in the movie magic.
You know us from our Science Meets Cinema deep dives, Ghostbusters gear, RoboCop tech, even everlasting gobstoppers.
But today it's time to go real deep, where we set aside the science and just dig into the heart of the film. Story, characters, themes, those moments that stick with you.
So dim the lights, cue the popcorn, and let's dive real deep into Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, how you doing?
I'm fine. So this morning, I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and the doc gave me the thumbs up.
Up your
So,
butt?
you read my mind.
That's when you're in your 40s. That's usually what it
That's
means when you
just
say the
what
doc.
that means. That's
Doc
right.
gave me the
No.
old thumbs up.
But apparently, and speaking of plumbing, because that actually comes up in the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it's Big Russ Thompson's excuse for why they can't go on their annual fishing trip with their RV buddies. And by the way, I think Matt Frewer, who plays Big Russ Thompson, may be one of the most underrated roles in family comedies. What an amazing performance by that guy. But no, I'm good, man. How about you? What have you been up to today so far?
Let's see. I woke up, had a cup of coffee,
How was
and then
that?
you called and said, "Hey, let's record this thing." I
Because
slept.
you'd
I slept
forgotten,
in.
yeah? Okay.
No, it's not that I'd forgotten. I slept in. Like I normally wake up around 7:30. For some
Yeah,
reason,
yeah.
today I slept till 10.
You know what?
I have
Sometimes
no
you need
idea.
that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that. So that's good. Did dog keep you up? Is that what happened?
No, actually, my son texted me last night and wanted to play a video game with me online. So
Nice.
so I did, and I was up too late.
Well, there you go.
You
Those
know,
things happen.
anytime your kid reaches out to you and says, "Hey, Dad, you want to play video games with me?" Even when he's in college,
You're
like,
absolutely not gonna say no, right?
no, absolutely not. Sorry, I have to drop everything else that I'm doing to do this. Yeah,
I like it. Well, and
yeah.
that's a little bit of that kind of leads us into our story here today. It's a story about family. It's a story about what happens when a major disruption, that of a technological nature, disrupts both your family's life and the next door neighbor's life, and you end up finding out that the disruption is that your kids have all been shrunk to a quarter inch tall. So what's your first memory of this movie there?
So I have a really weird memory about this movie because we, whenever I want to say I was in fifth grade, my parents decided we're going to Disney World. So we
Okay.
hopped in the car and drove down to Orlando, Florida, and we got there and I don't think they did their research because when we got to Disney World, it was during the wettest part of the year. So like and all the people that we talked to was like, yeah, just this time of year, it's nice and sunny in the morning till about noon, but then at noon, a big storm rolls in and it'll storm till 5, and then it rolls out like clockwork
That's
every
right.
single day.
Yep, that's
And
right.
that's what happened every single day. So basically, we would get up early in the morning. We would go to the Magic Kingdom or Epcot or wherever and do as much as we could between 8 a.m. and noon. And then when it started raining, we had to find something else to do. So one day, my dad was like, "Why don't we go see a movie?" And I remember us going to a three screen theater, and because two of the movies were rated PG-13, which was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Weird Al Yankovic's UHF, both of which I wanted to see more than anything in
More
the
than
world
this,
that
right?
summer.
Yeah.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was the other movie, and he was like, "Let's go see that. It's Disney. It's got the guy from Ghostbusters in it. Let's go." So we did, and yeah, we went to some random movie theater in Kissimmee, Florida, and watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Uh, and so then the next day we went to, I guess it was Hollywood Studios, maybe one of the Disney parks that was down there in the late 80s.
Okay.
And we're walking through. It was kind of like, come and see us film Double Dare. Come and do all the Hollywoody kind of things. And one of the exhibits was a Honey I Shrunk the Kids exhibit
No
that they had
way.
just put in, and it was, the scene where they're riding on the bee at the end of the
Yes.
movie?
Right, yeah.
Okay. They had the bee prop there, and you could climb up on it, and it had little like handles where you could hold on to it, and it moved around like a bucking bronco, like you see at a bar, where
Yeah,
like
right. Yeah, yeah.
it moved around like that, and basically there was a green screen behind you, and they turned on a fan and blew mist water in your face and like filmed you like you were riding the bee. And then when you got off, you got to go and buy the videotape of like me and my brother riding the bee through Wayne Zielinski's backyard. They did all the Hollywood special
Oh
effects
my
and
gosh.
everything.
Really? Seriously?
Yeah. Yeah. And we stood there and watched it. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. It's probably another building block into why I became a filmmaker. And my parents were like, it's $20. We're not going to buy it. And so we didn't buy it, but I did get to watch it. But
Oh
yeah,
my
that was
gosh, that's amazing.
yet
But
another core memory.
I was gonna
Sheesh.
say core memory, and your recitation of that event was, I think, probably verbatim. That was very vivid. Uh,
Yeah.
but to touch on it for just a second, it sounds like, because we've talked in a couple of previous episodes about the impact practical effects had on you, particularly when you were younger.
Hmm.
Um, having the opportunity to actually experience something that was used in the film,
Hmm.
like what kind? I mean, that sounds like it had a pretty major impact on how you on
It was
how you
huge.
saw, because you're seeing behind the frame at that point.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't as cool as I imagined it would be actually riding on a bee through somebody's backyard, obviously. But it also was
Right?
pretty darn cool because that thing could have bucked us off if we hadn't held on really tight. So, like, my brother and I were both supposed to hold on super duper tight, and the wind was blowing in our face, and little spittle droplets of water were coming at us. And, like,
Amazing.
there was a green screen behind us, and my parents were watching us. And I was just like, I remember thinking, this must be what it's like to be in the movies, and it was super cool. And I wish that's one of the big regrets of my life is that we didn't buy that tape.
One more thing that hooked you and,
Yeah.
eventually led to your vocation, right?
Yep.
So, my original memory of this film, so this,
You
Honey,
saw
I
it 2
Shrunk.
weeks ago, right?
Right, exactly. No. Wouldn't that, no, just wouldn't that be hilarious if that was
Yeah.
actually actually the case? Um, so this movie comes out in 1989. I am 10 years old, okay?
Mhm.
And this is just at the time where, after films are released in wide distribution, studios were recognizing how much of a market there was in the VHS market after the fact, right?
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
were more quickly getting to VHS than they had previously. So I don't remember if it was a year later, maybe about a year later, because I remember seeing the previews for the film, but my mom and dad just didn't go to movie theaters. That wasn't a thing that they did, and we rarely went to see a movie. Well, my dad, however, had been a movie buff ever since he was a kid. Everything you can imagine from the 40s and 50s and 60s on television, he'd watched every episode. And then when he found out that, after VCRs came out, and he found out you could rent things, our local grocery store had this, to be honest with you, fairly impressive selection of VHS tapes. They had a classic section, they had a comedy section, they had, all these different. Well, we were down there one day, and he saw the film, and he had remembered that, it had not that long ago, it had come out in theatrical distribution, so we rented it. So my first time seeing this movie was in my living room on my parents' 19-inch Zenith color television.
Okay.
And I think the thing that struck me about it more than anything else was that they had managed to tell a story that actually had these underpinnings of family dysfunction. And then, because at 11, I was actually really concerned with the psychology of family dysfunction. And so, these for those of you who don't know me, that's a joke, but it's also not. So figure that out. So I remember going, wow, wait a minute. They're using comedy and special effects, but they're also teaching you about the fact that Big Russ Thompson can admit the fact that he's somewhat ashamed of his son because he's not an athlete, and that the fact that the neighbors have a yard that's overgrown makes this guy think that they're less than they are. And this family, even though they're super successful, and one of them is a scientist and one's a lawyer, but I realized that there was this rapper that had these cool special effects, these this romance between this teenage guy and this teenage girl, and this coming of age aspect for both of the families in terms of the kids developing into something that their parents want them to be. I went, they're telling a story that actually has a meaning, but I'm laughing my brains out, and I'm also just completely enamored with the with these special effects. And that was all happening on the small screen for me. So I didn't get to see it on the, on the big screen. I've never seen this film in theaters. But it was the first movie I had ever seen Rick Moranis in, because at that point I had not seen Spaceballs, nor had I seen Little Shop of Horrors, and I just thought the guy was hilarious. So it was my introduction to him. We should also mention this film is directed by Joe Johnston, and anybody who is at all familiar with that name knows that this man has an impressive resume. He's known for everything from The Rocketeer to Captain America. I mean, he did Raiders. He was the art director on Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, this guy has an
Same with
unbelievable.
Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back and
See,
Star Wars. Like he
Star
was,
Wars, I mean, this
yeah,
guy, he really is he's a Hollywood noble is what he is, you know? And so all of these ingredients came together, a really, really funny and tight script. And then, of course, it was shot on film, and so it had that look from that era of how it was shot. Yeah, my first experience with this film was a core memory. It was.
oh, dude, let's not forget, the three-story tall oatmeal cream pie in the
Let us
backyard.
not.
It's funny how when you were 10 years old or 11, you were concerned about family dynamics and like the story and stuff. Meanwhile, I'm just like, ooh, big ant, ooh, big blades of grass, ooh, you know what I mean? Like, I was just all about the special effects and getting to watch the guy from Little Shop of Horrors,
Of course, right,
Spaceballs, and
Spaceballs, yeah.
Ghostbusters in another movie because he was one of my favorite actors when I was a kid. So
Well,
yeah,
let's
that's
yeah, let's not downplay Rick Moranis's contribution to not only film comedy but also stage comedy. I mean, the guy is he's a brilliant comedic mind. He
mhm.
absolutely is. And his performances in all of his films are I mean, not only memorable but in some cases iconic. Obviously, no one's ever going to forget his performance in Spaceballs, right? So
Or Strange Brew for crying
there
out
you go,
loud.
right? I mean, come on.
It's funny that
So
and plus he's kind of a saint, being on top of the world, huge movie star.
yep.
Then in the mid 90s, his wife gets sick and she passes away. And he says, somebody's got to raise these kids. So he just leaves
He
Hollywood.
leaves the industry, yeah.
That's freaking amazing.
It
Now,
absolutely
I
is.
would assume it's been 30 years. His kids are probably grown. Where are you, Rick Moranis? Come back. Be
This
in
is the
something else,
this is the official call to action for Rick Moranis. Mr. Moranis, you must
please.
once again grace us with your presence on the silver screen, which means you have to film a comedy in black and white.
Oh
So, there
gosh.
we
All right, let's take a look at his IMDb and see if he's got anything
pull it
upcoming.
up.
Holy cow.
I
Okay.
imagine
There's a
okay.
show in pre-production directed by Joe Johnston called
What?
Shrunk. An amateur scientist and father accidentally shrinks his family with his latest invention, a sequel to the 1989 film Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Are you kidding me?
What?
What? Got Rick Moranis as Wayne Zelinsky, Josh Gad as Nick Zelinsky.
Oh,
Oh
Josh
my
Gad's
gosh.
that's
Is this
amazing.
Is this for real, or are you
Is
somehow
this on The
punking me
Onion?
on
What are you
my
looking at
it's
this
on
at?
IMDb. It is IMDb. OMG. Wow.
Love
That's
it.
crazy, dude. Crazy.
I'm glad
Okay.
we did this now.
Yeah, really. So yeah, tell me what tell me about like the movie itself. What talk about the plot for a second.
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. So, try and be succinct here.
Yeah.
No, the movie shows us two families. They're neighbors, right?
Mhm.
One family has a sort of aspiring scientist as the dad who is trying to get an invention, which is essentially a shrink ray. Um, he's introducing the concept to a bunch of fellows at the university where he's trying to get funding for it. And his wife, who is, I believe, she is an attorney. Sort of the breadwinner for the family because he's been trying to get these various inventions that he's that he's created over the years to get funding. And so she's really carrying the family financially, but they have this really great dynamic in terms of she understanding his necessity for creative and sort of an inventive lifestyle. Next door, you've got sort of almost more like the what we've been told anyway is the typical American family. Mom and dad. Dad is, he's a hunter and a fisher, and he's got a job, a blue collar job. Mom stays home with the kids. You've got two sons, one of whom is sort of this sports obsessed a kid, the younger of the two, and
Mhm.
then the older kid who dad is sort of trying to mold to be like himself, but who's a bit more sensitive and thoughtful. And he's not really into lifting weights or crushing the quarterback, right? And then on the flip side, the family with the scientist dad, Mr. Wayne Zelinsky, he has two kids. He has an older daughter who's kind of, they portray her as a typical teenage girl who just wants to go to the mall and hang out with her friends. And then you've got the younger son who is just absolutely obsessed with his father as an inventor and scientist and is trying to emulate him in every way possible. And these two families, one who is getting ready to leave on a vacation or an RV road trip, an annual fishing trip that Big Russ Thompson and his family go on every year with a couple of their friends. And then Rick Moranis' character and his family, who he's getting ready once again to present this invention on the day that the Thompsons are supposed to leave, and that this big presentation is supposed to happen with this shrink ray. He fails in his presentation. Wayne Zelinsky does. He brings the thing back home. He puts it back up in the attic, and he's so angry at it that he starts beating on it with this tool, right? And pieces are flying off. At the same time, just as he leaves the attic after his outburst, the next door neighbor's youngest kid is trying to hit a baseball and finally connects. And when he does, it launches the ball through the attic window. The ball falls onto the machine. And when the ball falls onto the machine activates. And it just so happens that at that time, because the younger son and his older brother had come over to the Zelensky's house to get the ball, which had gone through the window, all four kids go up to the attic and are in the line of the laser beam from the shrink ray when it activates. And the beam has to go through the baseball, which has landed on the machine, which ends up being the secret ingredient that was missing to the successful shrinking of objects. And from there, we go on an adventure where the kids, after having been sort of catapulted into the backyard, have to make their way from the back of the backyard back to the house. And the parents, who cannot now find their children, the Thompsons as they're about to leave for their vacation, and the Zelenskys after they get back from their various tasks, are in a panic because they think that their children have run away. And this only, of course, as I was mentioning earlier, this only, of course, further. Sort of gives an illustration of the disconnect between the parents and their kids, and so that's kind of the plot in a nutshell. What are your thoughts on anything I either omitted or something that you wanna touch on?
I mean, the main crux is when the dad finally kind of recovers from his hissy fit. He
Yes.
comes back upstairs to sweep up all the broken glass, and he
Yes.
ends up sweeping the children up into the dustpan,
That's right.
dumping them in the garbage, and taking the garbage bag out to the curb, which is through the back on the other side of the backyard.
Right.
So the kids are in a garbage bag on the other side of the backyard, and they use a little piece of the broken glass to cut through the plastic of the garbage bag, and they see that they're like on the other side of the chain link fence, and they have like basically the equivalent of a 5 mile walk to get back to the house through
Right.
this gigantic jungle, which is their overgrown backyard. So that's the adventure, is these four kids stuck in this huge jungle full of all kinds of monsters, which is literally just their backyard with ants and spiders
With
and
ants and spiders and
oh,
a
scorpions.
scorpion,
Yeah, that's right. Somehow they
which
live in an area that has scorpions in
scorpions
their
just hanging
backyard.
out in the
Yeah.
backyard.
Yeah.
Do you remember the shot? Yeah, I know you do. When they use that piece of glass initially to cut open the bag, and
Mhm.
so it's a POV shot for the kids, and they're looking out, and the bag opens
Yeah, there's
up,
like
and then they see everything oversized,
yeah.
right, for the first time. And that's where we start to get them placed into the set pieces that they're doing there for with all the overgrown blades of grass and things like that. Were you the first time you saw it, because you said you saw it in the theater, did you even flinch for a moment when you saw that stuff as a disconnect from it being something real, or were you completely immersed?
Oh, it's completely immersed.
Same
From
here.
the second
Absolutely.
they jumped on the blade of grass to slide down it like a slide
Yes.
to the ground, I was in. I'm like, "I'm all in, let's go." And, like, yeah, they come across ants, scorpion, there's a toy in the middle of the yard, there's, what else do they come across? Oh, like
The
Lego, they
the
sleep in the
Lego, they
Lego.
sleep in the Lego, that's right.
Yep, they come
You
across the
mentioned
giant oatmeal
the
cream
cream
pie,
pie, right? The cream
which
pie.
I must have watched that scene so many times. I don't know, they're just grabbing handfuls of the cream and, it was just so cool. Oh, and then there's the other scene when the sprinkler comes on and these
Uh-huh, that's right.
giant
Giant
cannonballs
drops
of
of water.
water. Yeah. I don't know, they did a really, really good job with this movie, and I think if anybody other than Joe Johnston, who has a stellar special effects background, had
Yes.
tackled this film, it might have come off as cheesy.
I absolutely agree. And I think one of the major achievements of the film, talking about special effects, and this, of course, is in a time where special effects are still being largely blended. They're using some blue screens for things at this time, but certainly
Mhm.
didn't have the CGI capabilities that VFX teams have now. And one of the major achievements of the film, in my opinion, is the lawnmower scene
Yeah.
where hold on, I want to find the character's name.
Spoiler alert, they all get mowed up
They all
and
get
chewed up
mowed into pieces,
by a
that's right. They
lawnmower,
go from
yeah.
being a quarter-inch tall to being 6.5 millimeters tall.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so the character's name, Tommy Purvis, he was supposed to come mow the grass, and he didn't do it. So later on, after all the shrinking has happened, he comes back. He finds, because again, Wayne Zelinsky's an inventor, he finds the lawnmower that is remote controlled. He grabs the remote control off the top of the lawnmower and starts mowing the lawn by remote control. He's got a pair of headphones on so he can't hear anything. And as it's going through the yard, suddenly the kids hear this whirring sound and grass starts to fly past them. And before you know it, they're almost being sucked into the blades, right? And I mean, the way that that scene is done is quite brilliant. Everything from the practical, I mean, they use miniatures for that. Everything from the practical, them being, I don't know, it was probably them using some kind of wire work in some of the places. And suspending them from the sets, but there looks like they're being sucked up and they're holding on to each other as they're being sucked away.
Yeah.
I mean, it was phenomenal. And that that leads to one of the best scenes, which is after the Zelensky parents get home and they realize what's happening. And at this point, they both believe that their kids are shrunk and in the backyard somewhere. They get Tommy to stop the lawnmower, and then they set up this contraption where these hammocks that they lay in, and they're
Yeah.
swinging around the yard so they don't actually step in the yard with magnifying glasses and like little flashlights attached to these helmets, and they're looking for the kids and they're calling for their kids. And at one point, Big Russ Thompson walks out into his yard and he sees them doing this, and he just looks at him and he goes, "What a weird family, man."
Right.
Oh
So
my
good. You know,
gosh.
the only thing that we really haven't talked about in this is the iconic shot of the film, which was in all the trailers, was
Uh-huh.
when the kid falls into the bowl of Cheerios and he's
Yes.
in the spoon and his dad's about to
Don't
eat
eat
him.
me.
Yeah. Oh man. That seeing that trailer, that one scene from the trailer, I was like, I have to see this movie.
So hopefully you weren't too disappointed that instead of seeing the other two films, UHF and what was the other one?
Indiana Jones and the Last
Oh, The Last
Crusade,
Crusade.
man.
That's rough. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah,
know,
super rough.
still practical effects, right? Your dad introduced you
Yep.
to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Um, in terms of longevity, because this seems to be one of those films that I don't hear people really talk about that much anymore, unless you
Mm-mm.
were the right age, either
Yeah.
as a parent or a kid, right? To see the film when it was released or shortly thereafter when it came out on VHS. Is this a kid? Is this a film your kids have seen?
Oh my gosh, you know what? I don't know if they have.
Okay.
It's not a movie that we talk about. Like, now that you mention that, I geez. I'm gonna have to show this movie to my kids. Well, because we do an outdoor movie series in our backyard, and we invite all the neighborhood kids to come over. And like last year, we did The Princess Bride and Beetlejuice and Back to the Future,
Nice.
Edward Scissorhands. We do all. I try to show all the kids in the neighborhood like classic '80s films, and they eat it up. They love it. We watched Labyrinth one time. We watched Ghostbusters. So maybe this year we'll do Honey I Shrunk the Kids. That's a great idea.
That's a great idea. That's an awesome outdoor movie, right? That is an
Hmm.
awesome outdoor movie.
And you're
Um,
invited.
oh, thanks.
No
Excellent. I'll just
problem.
hop on a plane. So it's not quite that far, but you and I
Yeah,
do have a
yeah.
bit of a distance between one another.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Now I'll say you mentioned a moment ago. You mentioned the scene where little Nick Zielinski falls into the bowl of Cheerios, right?
Mhm.
Quick piece of trivia because I do think this is phenomenal. For that scene, the miniaturized Nick when he drops into the bowl of Cheerios, they filled a tank with 16,000 hear that, 16,000 gallons of a milk-like substance.
Ugh.
Okay? Was not milk, obviously. It was made from chlorinated water, food thickener, okay, and pigment. And then the Cheerios themselves, those were actually made from tractor inner tubes, and they were 12 feet in diameter and coated in foam. So, movie
Gotta love
magic
it.
a movie magic and a little bit of, if you ask me, a little bit of gross as well. I don't how would you have loved to have been the kid that played Nick Zielinski and go, "Yeah, well, it's gonna be a milk-like substance, a lot of chlorinated water, and probably some other stuff you don't wanna know about."
Let's go. That's what I would've
You
said.
would have said, "I'm in."
Absolutely. Heck
Wh
yeah.
where do I sign? Absolutely, good deal. Any additional thoughts on this real deep?
No, no, I just talking about this makes me really want to watch it
To
again. I
watch it
know
again. Yeah.
I know we probably should have watched the movie before we talked about it, but I've seen it so many times
Same.
that I'm coming at this from a perspective of nostalgia and whatever's in my head. Maybe I should give it another watch and see if my opinions on it change.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, right? Yeah, but I
Yep.
think in some senses too, there's something about stories, films, novels, whatever you listen to podcasts. There's something about stories where there's almost, I think, a more pure um, way in which we experience it through the nostalgia because it's whatever that initial impact point was for us with it.
Mhm.
And so that even if we view it later, I think that and we have different opinions on it. There's something I think to be said for not losing the nostalgic point of view on the story because it does inform something in us in terms of our development,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
right?
Well, shoot. On that
On
note,
that note,
I think
on
that
that
wraps
note,
us up. Yeah, that wraps our real deep on Honey I Shrunk the Kids. I hope you enjoyed hanging out in the cinematic trenches with us.
now, look, guys, if you're loving this format, drop us a review, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to do that, and share with your fellow movie buffs.
Next time, we'll be back in the lab, pondering whether or not you can learn Kung Fu in 10 seconds like they did in The Matrix. Thanks for listening to Deep Nonsense, and we'll see
See
you
you
on
on
the
the
next
next
reel.
reel.